I was watching Derek in the break room the other day. He had this massive Excel spreadsheet open. I'm talking dozens of tabs, color-coded, with ROI projections so dense they looked like they belonged in a NASA briefing. He was trying to decide whether to finally pull the trigger on an MBA. He looks like the most prepared man in the building. He told me he'd been weighing the variables for nearly 2 years. Every time a new data point surfaced, a shift in interest rates, a viral LinkedIn post about a successful dropout, he'd dive back into the cells, adjusting formulas, chasing a version of the future where the risk of failure was mathematically zero. He was vibrating with the kind of intensity you usually see in someone seconds away from a major breakthrough. But then I asked him a simple question. How are the application essays coming along? His face went completely blank. The intensity vanished, replaced by a heavy, hollow silence. He hadn't written a single word. He hadn't even bookmarked the submission portal. 2 years of high-level strategy hadn't actually resulted in a single minute of progress. He was a world-class architect who had spent his life drawing the perfect house but hadn't bought a single brick. Watching him, I realized Derek wasn't actually planning for his future. He was hiding from it. He'd built a mental fortress out of what-ifs to protect himself from the terrifying reality of actually making a choice. It's a quiet, sophisticated kind of self-theft. We tell ourselves we're being responsible, that we're doing the work, when really we're just caught in a loop that feels like movement but is actually a cage. It's a trap that doesn't just stall your career. It slowly erases the person you were supposed to become.
Wow. Yeah, that heavy, hollow silence you just described, that is the exact sound of a modern human brain just completely short-circuiting. It's the sound of the machine grinding to an absolute halt.
It really felt like the air just went out of the room. But, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just looking at Derek. I mean, I was looking at myself.
Right.
I was looking at pretty much everyone I know. We all have a Derek folder on our hard drive somewhere, don't we? A project or a life change that we've analyzed to death, but we haven't actually touched.
Oh, absolutely we do. Derek isn't some outlier here. He's an archetype. He really represents this fundamental collision between the physical architecture of the human brain, which, evolved over millions of years to solve very specific, very immediate problems, and the sheer infinite complexity of the modern world.
So you're saying this isn't just a personality flaw? Because I think that's the immediate assumption most of us make. You look at Derek and you think, oh, the guy is indecisive, or he's just scared.
Assumption.
But looking through the materials we gathered for this deep dive, the clinical psychology, the evolutionary biology, the neuroscience, it seems like something much deeper is breaking down here. Our mission today is really to figure out why this mechanism that's supposed to keep us safe is actually paralyzing us.
It is much deeper. And to understand why Derek is stuck in that spreadsheet, or why you might be stuck on a decision right now, we have to understand how the human brain processes time. We basically need to distinguish between two very different types of time. There is physical time, and then there is mind time.
Okay, let's establish the baseline first. Physical time is just, that's what's on my watch, right?
Exactly. Physical time is totally objective. It's measured by atomic clocks. It's governed by the laws of thermodynamics, by entropy, and it moves in exactly one direction. It goes from the past to the present to the future.
It's a strictly one-way street.
The universe does not have a rewind button. You can't go back to yesterday, and you definitely can't jump forward to next week.
But the human brain...
Yeah, the human brain does not inhabit physical time. It inhabits mind time. And in mind time, we are essentially bidirectional time travelers.
Well, bidirectional, so we go both ways.
Right. We have this, frankly, magical ability to completely detach our consciousness from the immediate now. I mean, you can close your eyes right now and project yourself entirely back to your 10th birthday party.
Oh, I can literally smell the cake.
See? You can smell the candles. You can feel the excitement of the wrapping paper.
Or I can project forward to a vacation I haven't even taken yet. Like I can see myself on a beach next year.
Exactly. You are pre-experiencing a future that hasn't happened yet. This is what researchers actually call mental time travel. For a long time, the scientific community just thought this was a quirky byproduct of intelligence. A nice little feature.
Like a bonus app that came pre-installed.
Exactly. But the consensus now is that this isn't just a feature. It is the defining trait of human cognition. It is our absolute superpower. It's the very thing that allowed us to build civilizations, to plant crops for a harvest that was months away, and to invent tools for problems we hadn't even encountered yet.
Okay, so mental time travel is the superpower. It's what makes us human. But if it's this incredible superpower, why is it completely ruining Derek's life? If he has this amazing evolutionary ability to see the future, why is he paralyzed in the break room staring at Excel?
And that right there is the central paradox we're dealing with. We have this biological mechanism designed to keep us safe, the ability to simulate the future so you can survive it. But in our modern environment, that simulation engine is basically overheating.
It's running too hot.
Way too hot. Because trapping us in these endless loops of anxiety because the tool we are using to predict the future is fundamentally mismatched with the reality we are trying to predict.
Let's get into the mechanics of that tool then. Because when Derek is staring at those cells in Excel, imagining a future where he gets the MBA versus a future where he doesn't, what is physically happening in his brain? Is he accessing some kind of future memory bank?
That is the really intuitive assumption to make. We know we have a memory bank for the past, so we naturally assume there must be some kind of prediction bank for the future. But the neuroscience on this is crystal clear. There is no future folder in the brain.
No future folder at all.
None. The brain simply cannot remember something that hasn't happened.
So how does it generate the image then? I mean, if I imagine myself sitting in a corner office with that MBA, where does that picture actually come from?
It comes entirely from the past.
Really?
Yes. To build the future, the brain actually has to raid the archives of what has already happened. This is known in the literature as the Constructive Episodic Simulation hypothesis.
Constructive Episodic Simulation. That sounds like we were like building a movie set.
We basically are. Think of your memory not as the library of videotapes. I think we tend to think of memory like a GoPro. You walk around, you record your life, you put the tape on a shelf, and when you want to remember something, you just click play.
Right. The file called The Time I Went to the Beach, click play.
Exactly. But that is fundamentally not how memory works. If memory were a perfectly recorded videotape, we wouldn't be able to imagine the future. We would just be stuck playing reruns. So instead, you need to think of your memory like a giant bin of Lego bricks.
Okay, Lego.
Each individual brick is just a tiny fragment of an experience. A red brick is the smell of coffee. A blue brick is the exact look on your boss's face when she's angry. A yellow brick is the feeling of sitting in a freezing cold conference room.
So when I want to remember the past, what happens?
Your brain quickly grabs those specific bricks and assembles them to reconstruct the scene as best as it can. But, and this is the absolute key here, when you want to imagine the future, your hippocampus, which is the memory center, goes diving into that exact same Lego bin.
Oh, wow. So it grabs the angry boss face brick and the cold room brick.
And it combines them with entirely new configurations. Maybe it adds a new office brick or a big presentation brick. It shuffles the deck. It pulls these totally disparate details from your past and flexibly recombines them to simulate a novel future event.
So we are quite literally recycling the past to hallucinate the future.
We are simulating it, yes. And this actually explains something that frustrates people all the time, which is why our memories are so incredibly prone to error.
Yeah, because we get things wrong all the time.
Constantly. We tend to view memory errors, forgetting details, mixing people up, altering timelines, as bugs in the system. We think, stupid brain, why didn't you just record that perfectly?
Right, we blame ourselves for having a bad memory.
But researchers are pointing out that these aren't bugs at all. They're essential features.
Wait, how is having a bad memory a feature?
Because if your memory were a perfect, super glued videotape, you couldn't break it apart. You couldn't use those individual bricks to build anything new. You would essentially be trapped in the past. To have a flexible future, you absolutely must have a flexible, slightly unstable memory.
Wild. The system literally trains perfect accuracy for creative flexibility.
This deep connection between the past and future is often called the Janus hypothesis in the research. It's named after the Roman god Janus, who had two faces, one face looking back, one face looking forward. There are just two sides of the exact same coin that utilize the exact same neural machinery.
Which implies that if you lose one side, you lose the other.
We see this very clearly in clinical patients with severe amnesia. If someone has extensive damage to their hippocampus and they lose their episodic memory, which is their ability to recall specific life events, they typically also lose their ability to imagine the future.
So if you ask them what they did yesterday,
they draw a complete blank.
And if you ask them what they might do tomorrow,
they also draw a complete blank.
They are just stuck in this permanent,
eternal present. They completely lack the raw materials, the Lego bricks, to build a tomorrow.
But for the rest of us, the people who do have the bricks, we are building these simulations constantly. Though there is a very distinct difference in how it feels, right? Like when I look back at a memory, it feels pretty solid, but when I look forward, it feels really fuzzy.
That feeling is called the positive asymmetry.
Yeah.
We have an inherent bias. Retrospection feels like opening a solid file. Perspection, looking forward, feels like you're stepping into a thick fog. And this brings us to this crucial concept called autonoetic consciousness.
Autonoetic consciousness. Okay, that sounds like a heavy academic concept.
It translates roughly to self-knowing. It's basically the secret sauce of mental time travel. Like, my dog has semantic knowledge, right? He knows food is in the bowl. But autonoetic consciousness is the unique ability to place yourself, your identity, into the timeline. It is the subjective internal awareness that the I, who is sitting here talking to you right now, is the exact same I who was a small child 20 years ago, and the same I who will be an old man decades from now.
So it provides the core continuity of the self.
But because the future inherently hasn't happened yet, that forward projection is always unstable. And this is exactly where our friend Derek gets into so much trouble. Derek is using his massive spreadsheet to try to cure that instability.
He's trying to force certainty onto something that is literally just a probability cloud.
Exactly. He wants to, quote unquote, remember the future with the exact same clarity and solidity that he remembers the past, solely so he doesn't have to risk the pain of failure.
He's trying to solve an equation that mathematically has no solution.
Yes. He is trying to render a mental simulation in 4K resolution, when the brain's hardware can only process the future in like 8-bit. He just keeps adding more variables, hoping that if he just gathers enough data points, the fog is going to lift and he will simply know the outcome. But he can't know. So he just loops.
He loops. He's basically fighting his own biology. But, you know, this whole ability to plan, is it really entirely unique to us humans? You mentioned your dog earlier, and I know my dog definitely knows when it's dinner time. Is my dog time traveling?
That is essentially the million-dollar question in the field of comparative cognition right now. For a very long time, the scientific dogma was simply humans only. We assumed animals lived entirely in the present tense, just pure instinct and immediate reaction.
Right, stimulus and response.
Exactly. But recent research, specifically with corvids like scrub jays, has really shattered that assumption.
Well, the scrub jay. This is the bird in that breakfast room experiment we read about.
Yes. This experiment is just brilliant. Researchers took these birds and put them in a special suite with two distinct rooms. Let's just call them Room A and Room B. For a few nights in a row, they locked the birds in Room A without any food at all.
So the birds wake up in Room A and they're super hungry.
It's a miserable morning for them. So that's the no breakfast room. Then on alternating nights, they locked them in Room B, where they did get breakfast.
Okay, so the birds quickly learn the pattern. Room A equals I'm hungry. Room B equals I get fed.
Very simple association so far. But then came the crucial test. One evening, they gave the birds a ton of food. The birds ate until they were totally full, not hungry in the slightest. And then the researchers gave them the opportunity to cache or hide the leftover food in either Room A or Room B.
Now, if they were just living purely in the present moment, they shouldn't even care, right? They're totally full. Why bother hiding anything?
But they did hide it. And they consistently hid the food in Room A, the specific room where they knew they would be hungry the next morning.
That is just amazing. They were actively planning for a future motivational state, which is hunger, that was completely different from their current physical state, which was being completely full.
They mentally dissociated from their present reality to solve a problem in the future. And we actually see very similar behavior in cephalopods like cuttlefish. They will intentionally delay gratification. They'll wait for a much better prey item to swim by rather than just eating a mediocre one right in front of them. This suggests that the basic biological machinery for projecting into the future actually evolved convergently in very different types of brains.
So the hardware is definitely there in nature. Birds do it, mollusks do it, but, and I guess this is the core difference, the scrub jay is only worried about breakfast. That is what, a 12-hour timeline? Derek is worried about an MBA career path 10 or 15 years from now.
And that is the crucial distinction for humans. It's the sheer scale of the projection. The underlying machinery is the same. We're all building simulations, but the temporal scope is vastly different. A bird doesn't build a color-coded spreadsheet because a bird doesn't try to solve the existential problem of what if interest rates shift radically in 2028.
Right. We have expanded the timeline of our worries so far beyond the basic timeline of our daily physical survival needs. And speaking of survival needs, that actually brings me to a specific story from our deep dive that really highlights how this ancient machinery just spectacularly misfires in the modern workplace.
Oh, the developer story.
Yeah, I was reading about a man named Elias. He's a lead developer at this really high-pressure tech firm, and he found himself completely paralyzed by a single, seemingly routine line of code. To an outsider, it was just a standard software update, but to Elias, it felt like a potential catastrophe. His brain was spinning. What if the server crashes? What if the client loses millions of dollars? What if I'm the exact reason this entire firm collapses?
The stakes feel infinite to him.
Exactly. He spent 3 consecutive nights just staring at the deploy button, his heart racing as if he were literally being hunted. In his mind, he wasn't just looking at a glowing screen. He was basically a sentinel standing guard on an ancient savanna, totally convinced that every tiny rustle in the grass was a predator. His brain was functioning exactly as it evolved to do, simulating the absolute worst-case scenario to ensure his physical survival.
Right.
However, sitting in a modern office, this hyperactive risk assessment didn't save his life. It simply triggered a biological red alert for a digital ghost. It just left him in this state of total professional paralysis. I read Elias' story, and I just felt this deep pang of empathy for the ancient human trapped inside this modern cubicle.
It's a very real phenomenon.
We judge ourselves so harshly for being anxious. We think we're weak. But Elias' story reminds you that this isn't a character flaw. It's literally a survival mechanism that just hasn't received a software update in 50,000 years. It feels like a personal failure of nerves, but it's actually just our biology trying to protect us from lions that don't exist anymore. It turns a tool for survival into a cage of stagnation.
Turning a tool for survival into a cage. Elias is the absolute victim of what we call the evolutionary logic of panic.
It really feels like a glitch, though. When you're in it, it feels like your brain is just broken.
It feels terrible, yes, like a massive glitch. But from an evolutionary standpoint, it is actually a highly refined safety feature. It is just calibrated way too sensitively for the modern world. We have to look at the basic math of survival back in the Pleistocene era. Imagine you are Elias, but 50,000 years ago. You are out foraging on the plains, and you hear a rustle in the tall grass nearby.
Okay, I'm Elias on the plains. I hear a rustle. It could be a lion or it could just be the wind.
Right. You have a choice to make instantly. You can assume it is a lion, or you can assume it is the wind. Let's look at the cost of being wrong in both directions. This is the core concept of signal detection theory.
Let's run the scenarios.
Scenario A. You assume it is a lion. You drop everything, you run away in a total panic, and you climb the nearest tallest tree. But you look down, and it turns out it was just the wind. This is what we call a false positive. What is the actual cost to you?
I mean, I look pretty stupid in front of the tribe. I burned some extra calories running.
Exactly. The cost is incredibly low. You feel a bit silly, you might be a little tired, but the key metric is you are still alive to pass on your genes.
True.
Now, let's look at scenario B. You hear the rustle, and you assume it is just the wind. You stay right where you are, totally relaxed. But it turns out it actually is a lion. This is a false negative. What is the cost here?
The cost is game over. I'm literally lunch.
The cost is infinite. It's death. So nature, in its brutal wisdom, designed our brains to operate on what researchers call the smoke detector principle.
The smoke detector principle. Meaning it's better to be safe than sorry. Yeah.
You want your home smoke detector to go off every single time there is a fire, but to ensure it absolutely never misses a real deadly fire, you have to tolerate it going off every time you accidentally burn the toast in the kitchen. You have to tolerate the false alarms to avoid the single fatal miss. So, humanity today, we are the descendants of the deeply paranoid, the relaxed hominids, the ones who heard the grass rustle and said, it's probably just the breeze. They all got eaten. Their genes are not in our gene pool.
So Elias comes by a severe anxiety, completely honestly. He is just the genetic lottery winner of 10,000 generations of successful panic.
Correct. His amygdala, which is the brain's primary threat detection center, is actually doing a fantastic job. It is screaming danger right on cue. The core problem is the input he's feeding it. The deploy button on his software is not a lion. The company server crashing is not physical death.
But his body feels like it's death. Why does a computer problem feel physically identical to being hunted?
Because the human body only has one primary stress response system. It doesn't have a dedicated work stress button and a separate tiger stress button. It just has the one big adrenaline and cortisol button. So when your brain perceives any threat, a threat to your social status, to your financial resources, to your professional reputation, it dumps the exact same chemical cocktail into your bloodstream that it would use to prepare you for a violent tribal raid.
So Elias is sitting there in his ergonomic chair, his heart is pounding out of his chest. The blood is actively being shunted to his major muscle group so he can fight or flee. But he has absolutely nowhere to run to. He is just sitting there vibrating at his desk.
And this is exactly where the materials we looked at regarding the digital storm become so critical. It's not just that Elias's stress response is misplaced. It's that the sheer frequency of these triggers is completely unmanageable for a human nervous system.
Right, because on the ancient savannah, how often did you actually almost get eaten by a lion? Once a week?
Probably fairly rarely. It was a moment of acute, absolute terror, followed by very long periods of rest and recovery with your tribe. But look at Elias's modern life. Email notifications pinging at 9 p.m., Slack messages from his boss, push alerts on his phone about a collapsing economy, social media feeds constantly showing him peers who are getting promoted faster than him. He is being bombarded by these digital rustles in the grass 24 hours a day.
It's just this constant low-grade predator alert that never ever turns off.
Exactly. It places the sympathetic nervous system, which is the driver of that fight or flight response, in a state of perpetual, exhausting overdrive. We are unconsciously scanning for mortal threats in an environment where these so-called threats are everywhere, but they are rarely physically fatal. One of the sources actually described this phenomenon as a societal collapse in neurobiological equilibrium.
That is a genuinely terrifying phrase, a societal collapse in neurobiological equilibrium. It sounds like we are collectively just burning out our own neural wiring.
We are running high-voltage anxieties through low-voltage evolutionary circuits. Elias isn't broken. His hardware is just misapplied. He's a highly trained sentinel with no physical enemy to fight, so the enemy simply becomes the work itself.
And the absolute tragedy here is that this extreme vigilance actually makes him much worse at his job, right? Like, if he's in full fight or flight mode, his prefrontal cortex, the logical problem-solving part of his brain, is basically shutting down to conserve energy for his legs.
Exactly. The blood literally leaves the higher reasoning centers of the brain. You functionally become dumber when you're terrified. So his intense fear of making a coding mistake actually increases the biological probability that he will make a coding mistake. It's this vicious self-fulfilling prophecy powered entirely by evolutionary hardware.
So we have Derek, who is trapped by his inability to resolve a fuzzy future. We have Elias, who is trapped by seeing life or death lions in his code. But there's another trap we found in the research, and this one isn't about looking forward or looking at the present at all. It's about looking backward and just flat out refusing to look away. This brings us to what's called the simulation trap.
The simulation trap one.
Yeah, I came across this story about Sarah. She's a brilliant academic researcher, but she completely missed a massive life-changing grant deadline because she was utterly trapped in what psychologists call a counterfactual loop.
Right.
Months prior to this deadline, she had stumbled pretty badly during a public presentation. And ever since that day, her mind had just become this endless cinema of what-ifs. What if I had used a different data chart? What if I had just laughed off the mistake instead of profusely apologizing on stage?
She's just playing it over and over.
Replayed the scene thousands of times. She was desperately attempting to fix a past that was already written in stone. Evolutionarily, this ability to vividly simulate the past was another superpower. It allowed our ancestors to carefully analyze a failed hunt so they wouldn't go hungry the next time. But for Sarah, the so-called learning phase never actually stopped.
The loop just stayed open.
Yeah, she was so incredibly busy optimizing a version of reality that no longer existed anywhere but in her head that she allowed the actual present, the crucial grant deadline right in front of her, to completely slip through her fingers. When you look at Sarah's struggle, it feels like the ultimate adaptive trade-off. Our brains are so incredibly good at learning from our mistakes that they sometimes just forget to hit the stop button on the simulation.
Yeah.
It's a bit like being in a highly advanced flight simulator that refuses to ever let the pilot actually take off and fly a real plane. We really have to recognize that the what-ifs of the past are meant to be temporary teachers, not permanent residences. Sarah's experience is just this sobering reminder that while our ability to look backward is a huge part of what made us human, our total inability to look away from it is what keeps us stuck.
Teachers, not permanent residences. That is the perfect distinction to make here. Sarah is basically ghost hunting. She's expending all her energy trying to interact with the phantom.
And I think literally all of us do this to some degree. I mean, the shower argument, you know exactly what I mean. You have a frustrating argument with someone at work, and then 2 hours later, you're standing in the shower, and suddenly you come up with the absolute perfect, devastating comeback, and you just replay the argument in your head where you win.
Oh, you always win the argument in the shower. But the reality is the actual argument is long over.
Exactly. So why do we do that to ourselves?
What Sarah's doing and what we do in the shower is engaging in what psychologists formally call counterfactual thinking. This is the cognitive ability to imagine alternatives to our current reality. And the research we looked at, specifically from Duke University, breaks this down into two very distinct flavors. You have upward counterfactuals and you have downward counterfactual.
Okay, like those. Upward counterfactuals. That means imagining things going better than they did.
Yes. Upward counterfactuals are thoughts like, if I had only prepared a little more, I would have totally nailed that presentation. Or if I had left the house just 5 minutes earlier, I wouldn't have missed my train. You are mentally looking upward at a measurably better reality. This is exclusively what Sarah is doing.
And downward counterfactuals.
That's the exact opposite. That's imagining how things could have been significantly worse. Like, well, at least I didn't completely faint on stage, or at least I didn't get hit by that car when I ran the red light. At least I still have my job after that mistake.
Right. But Sarah seems completely, exclusively stuck in the upward version. She's entirely obsessed with the much better outcome she didn't manage to get.
And here is the real kicker about that.
Yeah.
Usually, upward counterfactuals are profoundly good for you.
Really? Because it honestly feels like mental torture when you're in it.
But evolutionarily, they serve what is called a preparative function. They're your internal teachers. If you accidentally burn your hand on a hot stove and you immediately think, man, if I hadn't touched that glowing burner, I wouldn't be in agony right now. That thought is highly functional. It quickly codes a permanent rule for the future. Do not touch the hot stove.
Okay, so the regret is actually just raw data.
Regret is incredibly valuable data. It's just your brain actively trying to update its internal algorithm so you don't make the exact same painful mistake twice. But, and this is where the adaptive trade-off comes in, for Sarah, the software update never actually finishes. The download bar gets stuck at 99% and just freezes there.
She isn't actually learning anything anymore. She isn't deriving a actionable lesson like, okay, next time I will practice my slide transitions better.
Oh, she is just relentlessly resimulating the raw pain of the failure. This is exactly where highly functional counterfactual thinking curdles into something toxic, which we call rumination.
Rumination, like how a cow chews cud.
That is actually the exact linguistic etymology of the word, chewing the cud. A cow brings it up, chews it thoroughly, swallows it, brings it up again, chews it again. It's this repetitive, cyclical, negative thinking that provides absolutely no forward solution. The research perfectly describes how insidious this is, because rumination mimics the feeling of problem solving.
It feels like you're doing work.
It really feels like work. You sit there thinking, I am deeply analyzing the root of this problem.
I'm getting to the bottom of this. I'm being responsible.
But you weren't. You're just digging a deeper hole to sit in. And this leads us directly to the concept of opportunity cost in human cognition. Your brain has a very strictly limited supply of glucose. It has a limited amount of daily processing bandwidth. If Sarah's actively using 90% of her mental RAM to render a high-definition, multi-sensory simulation of a speech she gave 6 months ago, how much RAM does she actually have left for today's grant application?
0. She has nothing left. She's effectively crashing her own operating system.
Precisely. The reflection and evaluation model in psychology suggests that in this hyper-ruminative state, we aren't even analytically evaluating the mistake anymore. We aren't looking for data. We are just compulsively re-experiencing the negative emotion attached to it. We are basically just hitting the sadness button on our own console over and over and over.
It's essentially self-flagellation, deeply disguised as self-improvement.
And it's a tragic form of self-theft. By doing this, we're actively stealing cognitive resources from our present self in order to pay a perceived debt to a past self that doesn't even exist anymore. The Sarah who gave that bad speech 6 months ago is gone. But the Sarah of today is literally losing her career trajectory because she cannot let go of the ghost of that past Sarah.
Ow. So we've got the future trap with Derek and his spreadsheets. We have the immediate threat trap with Elias and his code deployment. And we have the past trap with Sarah and her presentation. But there's one more trap we uncovered that I think is uniquely, specifically modern. It's the trap of actually having things way too good.
Yes, the good problem paralysis.
This is the story of Matteo. And honestly, when I first read his story, my initial reaction was, I just wanted to shake him. But then I take a step back and realize, oh no, I do this exact same thing.
Yeah.
Imagine this young, highly skilled professional named Matteo. He lives in a hyper-connected metropolis, and he's suddenly faced with 3 incredible, lucrative job offers in 3 different major cities. Now, to any rational outside observer, this is the ultimate good problem to have. But to Mateo, it felt like an impending death sentence.
It paralyzed him.
He spent weeks trapped in this state of environmental mismatch. His brain was just screaming at him, what if I pick the wrong tribe? What if I relocate to a territory that has no resources? In our long ancestral history, choosing the wrong group to travel with or the wrong valley to settle in often meant literal starvation and death. So we evolved this massive, blaring cognitive alarm system for any major geographic relocation.
And that alarm is deafening.
Right. Mateo's modern brain was treating a cushy career move to a different city, a city that has high-speed rail, massive grocery stores, and hospitals, as if he were being violently exiled into a barren wasteland. The sheer volume of modern choices he had, combined with this primitive, deep-seated fear of losing the tribe, resulted in a total collapse of his ability to move forward at all.
It's a profound system failure.
His story really highlights this profound disconnect between our ancient neurological hardware and our rapidly evolving cultural software. Mateo wasn't just being flaky or indecisive, he was experiencing a severe biological mismatch where a very ancient fear of exile was being inappropriately triggered by a wealth of modern opportunity. It's a really heavy weight for him to carry. And while people might casually dismiss it as a first-world problem, the physiological distress he is feeling is incredibly real. We are essentially trying to navigate a world of infinite choice, using a biological compass that only knows how to point towards safety or danger. And in the modern world, those compass needles are just spinning wildly out of control.
Spinning out of control is exactly right. Mateo is experiencing a textbook example of the environmental mismatch hypothesis.
I really feel for him. I mean, we constantly tell young people, the world is your oyster, go anywhere, do anything. But for his nervous system, it feels like the world is a sheer cliff he's being pushed toward.
Because for the vast majority of human history, leaving your established territory literally was stepping off a cliff. The traits we possess today evolved in what evolutionary psychologists call the EEA, the environment of evolutionary adaptedness. In that ancient hunter-gatherer context, your specific tribe was your only life insurance policy.
Right. No tribe, no survival.
If you left the tribe voluntarily or if you were cast out, you almost certainly died. You couldn't just pull out your phone, download a food delivery app and get dinner. You couldn't just quickly jump on a Zoom call to see your mom's face for comfort.
So we developed this massive, deeply ingrained cognitive alarm system specifically for geographic and social displacement.
Exactly. Mateo today has high-speed rail. He has ubiquitous internet. He is fundamentally not going to starve to death in any of those three cities. But his amygdala, that ancient threat hardware, is reacting exactly as if he is being permanently exiled into the frozen wilderness. Psychologists call this a phenotypic mismatch. His behavior, the crippling anxiety over good choices, makes absolutely zero logical sense in the modern environment, but it makes perfect life-saving sense in the ancient one.
And it's not just about the physical geography of moving cities, is it? It's also deeply tied to his social status.
So, we have to consider the mechanics of social organization here. The research we reviewed on hunter-gatherers, mismatch, and mental disorders points out that those ancient societies were largely highly egalitarian. You had a very strong, tight-knit, interdependent support network. Modern society, by contrast, is incredibly hierarchical and deeply isolated.
And status within that hierarchy matters more now, or at least the constant anxiety about losing that status is much more prevalent.
It is everywhere. There's a fascinating concept called the rank theory of depression. It suggests that a low mood or a highly anxious state can actually function as a biological submission mechanism.
Really, depression as submission.
Yes. If you feel like you are about to fall significantly in the social hierarchy, which is exactly what Mateo deeply fears will happen if he picks the wrong job in the wrong city, your brain might intentionally trigger a depressive or highly anxious state to force you to withdraw, stay put, and avoid a potentially fatal conflict over resources.
Wow, so his brain is basically screaming at him, don't move, just stay still. Because if you move, you might lose your current status, you might lose your resource access, and then you'll die. It's actively calculating these abstract, modern status risks as if they are literal, physical, life-threatening risks.
He's completely unconsciously calculating that a bad career move is biologically equivalent to being cast out of the protective village. The stakes feel totally existential to him because, for 99% of human history, those stakes were existential.
So, mapping all this out, we have Elias seeing deadly lions in his computer code. We have Sarah desperately trying to fix a ghost of the past. And we have Mateo deeply fearing ancient exile hidden inside a lucrative job offer. This all culminates in this frozen state we call analysis paralysis. And the tricky part is it feels so responsible when you're in it, right? It feels like we are being careful, thoughtful adults.
But the research on the silent trap calls that feeling a total disguise.
Right. Because it masquerades as doing the hard work. But what's really driving the car is loss aversion. We mentally weigh our potential losses so much heavier than our equivalent gains. Like, for Mateo, the agonizing fear of choosing the wrong city is a deafening siren. But the excitement of choosing the right city, that's barely a whisper.
And we try to prepay that regret. I mean, we all do this.
I do this constantly. I try to intensely feel the future regret of a bad decision before I even make it, somehow thinking that if I suffer now, it will help me avoid making the wrong choice.
That phenomenon is called anticipated regret. You are actively pre-experiencing the pain. And this creates a devastating psychological loop where doing absolutely nothing suddenly feels like the safest option, because doing nothing indefinitely delays the possibility of that specific regret becoming a reality. It perfectly plays into the illusion of control.
The illusion of control, meaning we think we can outsmart the universe.
Exactly. We deeply believe that if we just think hard enough, if we just add one more colorful tab to the spreadsheet like Derek did, we can completely eliminate all uncertainty. We are relentlessly trying to solve the future, but the future is not a math puzzle to be solved. It's an indeterminate, chaotic landscape that can only be navigated.
And while we are stuck in this holding pattern, while we're looping, something else is happening to us. It's not just that our careers or our lives aren't moving forward. We are fundamentally changing on the inside. The materials we read talk extensively about identity erosion.
This is perhaps the most crucial point of all. When you stay trapped in the what-if loop for too long, your internal narrative radically shifts. It goes from being situational like, oh, I missed a good opportunity, to being entirely characterological like, I am fundamentally the kind of person who misses opportunities.
Yeah, that's moving from I did a dumb thing to I am a dumb person.
Exactly. And this slowly but surely fosters learned helplessness. Your brain eventually learns that all this intense thinking doesn't actually lead to any tangible results. You expend massive amounts of emotional energy ruminating, but nothing in your real physical world actually changes. So your brain starts to adopt the belief that your physical actions simply don't matter anymore.
You essentially become a passive observer in your own life.
Yes. The identity function of future thinking tells us that we actively use our visions of the future to construct who we are today. If your vision of the future is solely a source of intense anxiety and potential failure, your core identity becomes incredibly fragile. We become people who are entirely defined by our fears rather than being defined by our choices.
That is genuinely heartbreaking, but, and this is the important pivot here, we can actually break this loop, right? The science we're looking at doesn't just diagnose the terror, it actually offers us real strategies to escape the cage.
It does.
So let's get to the escape hatch. How do we practically get Derek, Elias, Sarah, and Mateo out of these traps?
Okay, one incredibly powerful tool comes from that Duke University research on counterfactual thinking we discussed earlier. We talked about how Sarah was completely stuck in upward counterfactuals, obsessing over how things could have been so much better. But deliberately utilizing downward counterfactuals, consciously imagining how things could have been significantly worse, can actually be a profound emotional regulation tool.
So wait, instead of Sarah thinking, oh, if I had just used a different chart, I'd have won the grant, she should actively force herself to think, well, at least the projector didn't catch fire and burn the building down.
In a practical way, yes. The research heavily suggests that consciously, deliberately imagining worse outcomes rapidly repairs a damaged mood. It helps regulate that spiking anxiety. It's not at all about permanently lowering your standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about quickly grounding your nervous system in the physical reality that you actually survived the event.
Like saying it could have been a total unmitigated disaster, but we actually managed to recover the core data.
Exactly. It forcefully shifts the brain out of catastrophe mode and back into survival mode.
It provides immediate perspective to a panicked brain. Okay. What else works?
There is a very effective behavioral concept called implementation intention. This strategy moves us out of the realm of vague, paralyzing worry and into highly specific, actionable planning. So instead of looping endlessly on a vague thought like, what if I fail? You create a strict mental algorithm. If X happens, I will immediately do.
Okay, so for Elias, the developer, instead of sitting there vibrating and thinking, what if the server crashes, he rewrites it as, if the server crashes during deployment, I will execute the rollback protocol within exactly 5 minutes.
You functionally outsource your ambient anxiety to a concrete plan. You don't have to keep worrying about the what if because you have already pre-decided the then what.
Outsourcing the anxiety. And then there is this concept of behavioral activation. This was honestly one of my biggest takeaways from the Silent Trap research. It basically says, stop waiting until you feel ready to do the thing.
Yes. We overwhelmingly assume that motivation leads to action. We think, once I feel motivated, I will start writing. But neurobiologically speaking, it is very often the action itself that generates the feeling of motivation.
So the antidote to the Derek situation, the guy staring at the MBA spreadsheet for 2 years, isn't building a cleaner, better spreadsheet.
No. The antidote is opening a blank Word document and writing exactly one terrible sentence of his application essay.
Just one awful, clunky sentence.
One. Because the physical action of writing it breaks the mental time travel loop. It forcefully pulls his consciousness out of an imagined future and anchors him in the physical present. Grounding techniques do the exact same thing, like basic mindfulness or intensely focusing on your immediate sensory environment. They forcefully yank you out of the what if and plant you firmly in the what is.
There's one more concept we found that I just thought was really beautiful. It's a bit of an academic mouthful. Transpersonal extended mental time travel, or TEMTT for short.
It is definitely a mouthful of a term, but it's a lovely, profound concept. It essentially acknowledges that we do not have to do all this exhausting time travel completely alone. Humans are, at our core, a deeply social species. We use TEMTT to actively share our internal simulations with other brains.
So essentially just talking it out with someone.
But it's much more than just venting your stress. It's about literally co-constructing the future together. When Derek actually talks to a career mentor, or when Sarah finally opens up to a trusted colleague, they are actively offloading a portion of their heavy cognitive burden. They are allowing another human brain to help them build and verify the simulation. It completely shatters the agonizing isolation of the solo what-if loop. We can simply navigate the terrifying fog of the future so much better when we navigate it together.
That really brings us full circle back to where we started today. I mean, we've gone from Derek's color-coded spreadsheet in the break room, all the way to the African savannah, through the blinding digital storm of modern work, and back again.
It's quite an intense journey when you map it all out, and if we connect all this data to the bigger picture of our lives, it really fundamentally changes how we ought to view choice and decision-making. The what-if loop falsely promises us absolute safety through endless analysis. It promises that if we just think hard enough and long enough, we can finally discover the one perfect path where we never experience pain or failure. But that path simply does not exist.
Life doesn't politely pause and wait for your analysis to be flawless before it moves forward.
It doesn't. And the true danger, the real existential danger here, isn't actually making the wrong choice. The danger is the slow, quiet erosion of the self that happens when we perpetually choose not to choose at all. Because every day we wait, we're building an identity based on whether we want to be the perfect, paralyzed thinker or the imperfect, moving doer.
The imperfect doer. Looking at all this, I think I'd much rather be that.
Too. Because ultimately, you can almost always recover from making a wrong choice. You can pivot, you can learn, you can gather new data from a mistake, but you can never, ever recover from a life you never actually stepped into and lived.
So whether you are staring down a massive spreadsheet right now, or hovering your finger over a terrifying deploy button, or agonizing over a major life change, remember this: the ultimate what if isn't actually about the final outcome of the decision. It's entirely about who you become by finally making it.